of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'd like to start tonight with a legislative prayer or thought, and we've asked Commissioner Wright if she would offer that.
Thank you, Chair. Today is Flag Day, and just the actual act of pledging allegiance to the flag, we do it frequently. We do it at the beginning of each of these meetings, and hopefully we do it as families and as neighbors together and think about what that means to pledge allegiance to the flag. And today I just wanted to share a little thought. This is unknown, but the whole inspiration of our life as a nation flows out from the waving folds of this banner. And then I thought about the different times that I come from a very patriotic family, and the different times that we would have our family flag raising ceremonies and pledging of allegiance, and just the feeling that I get when I see our nation's flag and knowing that we live in a nation that is free, that is safe, and that brings that hope around the globe is, to me, just it brings gratitude to my heart. And I'm not going to sing the Star Spangled Banner for you. I didn't feel like that was appropriate. I almost asked Cassie to do it, but I wasn't sure if she'd say yes.
I know you're a performer.
But I am going to read the first two verses of this song. "Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming? Whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bomb bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? On the shore dimly seen through the midst of the deep, where the foe's haughty host in dread silence reposes. What is that which the breeze or the towering steep, as it fitfully blows, half conceals, half discloses? Now it catches the gleam of the morning's first beam, in full glory reflected, now shines in the stream. 'Tis the star-spangled banner, oh long may it wave, o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Grateful for that thought on this special day, and I hope that all of us will remember how blessed we are to live in this great country. We will now turn to a review of the minutes from our last commission meeting. And that meeting was held on May 24th. We'll just go through the minutes by page. If anyone has any comments from the commission, if they bring those to attention of the chair, we'll make appropriate amendments as necessary. Anything on page 1? Page 2.
I've got two things, I don't know, maybe technically 5 things. On line 38, we talk about parking codes 070 and 110. I'd like to add the full thing on there, so 12.52.070 and 12.52.110. I think that helps give the context of what we're talking about, not just random. And then the same thing on line 39 to add the same 12.52 in front of the 070 and then the 110. And then the only other one I had was on line 43. Pastor is spelled with an O-R, P-A-S-T-O-R. So that's all I have.
I'd like to make or suggest a change on line 27, where it says Chair Hershey confirmed that a site plan is needed, and then Mr. Snyder said yes. I think what happened there is I asked Mr. Snyder to confirm that a site plan was needed in order for staff to complete the parking analysis, and Mr. Snyder said yes. Anything else on page 2? Page 3?
I've got A couple more things. On line 1, it's the 1997 site plan, not the 1977 site plan. And then on line 38, again, 12.52.070 and 12.52.110.
And I would reiterate, on line 33, the same comment from the previous page. Chair Hershey asked Mr. Snyder to confirm that the CUP application could be considered. Anything else on page 3? Page 4. Comment on line 16, where it said, under the circumstances, that would not make a difference. When we use the word that, I just want to make it clear that we're talking about the difference between the 30-day termination and the 6-month termination referenced by Mr. T.J. Gale in the previous paragraph. So if we could just change the word that to the 30-day to 6-month termination period would not make a difference. Anything else on page 4? Page 5? Page 6?
I just have one on the paragraph starting on line 18, and actually on line 19, she said, in considering the RAP tax, it is important to narrow the focus and see what is required. Again, I may have said it exactly like that, but what I was saying is Commissioner Wright agreed and said it would be out of place to do piecemeal development, putting residential in the middle of 2 commercial districts. She said, in considering RAP tax, and then I think we also talked about park impact fees. So I think that whole sentence could maybe just go away and you could say something like, Commissioner Wright would like to consider the RAP tax, park impact fees, and other alternatives to see what is required.
Comment on that change. Anything else on page 6? Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of May 24th, 2017 with the approved amendments.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda for tonight's meeting is scheduled to be a public hearing. This is a zone map amendment dealing with property at 2026 North Main. This was initiated by the applicant Chad Morris. I'll turn the time to staff.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let me bring up the map here really quickly. So this is the Norma Moss Trust property under contract with Chad Morris, the developer and the applicant. So here you can see the property, and maybe it's better on the zoning map. Here we go. So it's about 1 acre in size. And it is in the neighborhood 3 of our general plan, which states that this neighborhood should all be low-density, single-family housing. So as you can see on the east side, it's almost completely surrounded by RL zoning. It's currently an RL lot. The application is to be residential low. So because it's 1 acre, you can fit 4 lots on the property, and there are no current concrete plans to how he would do that. Probably most likely 2 on this side and then 2 on Main Street, but there are a few plans that he's considering at this point. So based on the fact that it's in this neighborhood that would like to remain all low-density single-family, it's surrounded by RL, and on the other side it does have quite a few agricultural lots, but there is a school here across the street, and then these actually look like their properties, but it's actually completely just the LDS church across the street, even though this map makes it kind of look like there are some homes across the street. So it is surrounded by quite a few things, all which would not really affect the RL zoning change. I think that this fits within the general plan of this neighborhood, and I didn't see any outstanding problems with it surrounding the neighborhood or the adjacent properties on either side of it. The only thing is that there is a significant sites home currently on the property. So the home that is there is on our historic sites list, which is our local historic register. The developer did state that he wants to keep the home there and build other lots surrounding it, but he has expressed the desire to keep the home as it is, so that wouldn't have to be demolished or anything like that. And he has figured out a few ways to keep the home there and also put 3 other lots on the property. Obviously, that wouldn't be guaranteed with the zoning map amendment, but he can probably speak to you about that. But I didn't find that switching it to RL would be out of character with the neighborhood or the street in any way. The only concerns is that some of it is pretty steep, and obviously this property is in the hillside overlay. So there are a few cautions around that because the back end of the lot is pretty steep and would have to be graded properly and carefully, and might have some problems in development, but there were really no huge factors that I saw to be an issue in this, other than the fact that it's a historic home on the site.
Thank you, Cassie. Questions for staff?
What is the recourse, because it is a significant site, historic home, if he wanted to not have it, if it didn't work for his plans to have it there?
Unfortunately, there's no consequence.
Okay. I just wanted to know if there was anything as a city that we are trying to.
I think it just provides for, it's more of a documentation, so there's a short period to allow the Historic or Landmarks Commission to do some documentation of the site before anything happens. And we've also recently implemented some incentives.
Those are only for the Dual Creek Historic
That's
District.
right, only in the Dual
Yeah,
Creek. But, so in this district, you're right, it would only be to document before they take it down.
Do you know anything about the site specifically?
I don't.
On the
Like
historic register
significant-
stuff?
Yeah.
We're not familiar at a staff level, the history of it. Brandon might have been able to be a little bit, he probably wasn't either since he was so involved with Dual Creek. But like Lisa said, that if they chose to demolition, it's allowed.
That's just there. Okay.
The Landmarks Commission can hold that demolition permit up to 60 days for documentation, and then they would release it. We don't take 60 days usually, but that's the ordinance allowance.
Okay.
It looks like to me, Becky, that it has some of those, that old rock kind of architectural style that was a little bit of the settlers kind of thing is my guess. Is it
Farmington stone, the
Yeah,
infamous
that's
Farmington
probably
stone.
its contribution.
Centerville stone, it's on this.
Yeah, exactly. Farmington, nothing.
I have a question for staff. We spent recently a lot of time talking about backing out onto the main street. Is there any similar restriction about backing out onto Main Street with a new development in this area?
Well, the ordinance requirement for single-family development is that driveways can be used to back out onto public streets. However, Main Street is a UDOT-controlled road, and so any access at existing, UDOT honors, but new accesses, if it's available off a local street, that's their approval criteria.
So in this case, there is one access onto Main Street, it looks like. And so even if you were to divide this thing up, subdivide this up, that one, UDOT would still honor that one.
UDOT will honor the existing access, but they will definitively, since all of it's available for a public or a local road, all new accesses would be off of the 2050 north. I would see under very rare circumstances would they approve another access onto In fact, they would do it against their will to approve another access. The issue of when they can take away the access, you know, they would certainly look at that, but generally their position is that existing access is preserved, new ones no.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for the staff? Thank you. Would invite the applicant to come forward at this time, if he's here, and he is. And state your name for the record. And you can
Come in.
just take one of the mics, either one.
So my name is Michael DeRosa. I am here, I work with Chad Morris, and so do you guys have any questions?
Any comments you have to the staff report? Any clarifications you'd like to make?
Yeah, I mean, as far as verifications, you'd mentioned that we intended to keep the historic building on the site. For us, we think that would be the best plan for us to keep that there. As far as the, impact to the area, we agree as well that it is, that whole 2050 North is mostly RL. And personally, I don't see an impact to the neighborhood by changing the corner lot from AL to RL.
Do you anticipate any access issues, as Commissioner Daley pointed out?
I don't know.
So is maybe to address maybe Cassie's speculation then about how those parcels might go? Is it one to the east of the existing home and then two to the west of the existing home, or?
There's obviously a lot of different ways we could orient it. We had even thought about doing an easement in the middle between parcels to grant access onto 2050 North. But if we could use that little curb cut on Main Street, it would be beneficial.
Great. Any questions for the applicant?
Do you know anything about the home, the historic?
As far as the historic value, I do not know.
Thank you.
We do acknowledge that it was on the historic registry. We didn't look much further into that, but when we purchased it, or at least when we got under contract, we didn't have any intentions to tear it down.
Good. Thank you. This matter's been scheduled as a public hearing. We would invite any members of the public who would like to come forward and discuss this matter at this time. You can approach either one of the microphones and state your name for the record.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I could just add one. I received a phone call. I was unsure of what they were going to participate in, but at least I ought to mention the phone call to you. They did not leave their name. They were in the hospital apparently right now for a minor issue and couldn't make the meeting. They do plan on participating in the city council. I invited them to send a representative. They simply asked the question, what's it eligible for now? Being an acre size, you could do another half-acre lot, divide it off, keep the home, and create a new lot. He inquired to verify the 4 units an acre density if it went to the RL. It seemed to be the position that I think I heard him say is I'm uncomfortable with 4 lots because of the most of the area has large frontages and he would prefer only 3. I did try to explain the difference between rezone and development, and if it does move to the RL, it's a narrower review against the ordinances. Encourage him to come and participate, and he did say, well, then I would prefer 2 and stay agriculture. So he didn't say to forward that comment, but given the circumstances in the hospital, it's a little hard to decide where you're going to participate. So I thought I'd mention the call to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you also, Cassie, scoot back on the zoning? I just want to see the houses that front Main Street.
Like this?
Yes.
Okay.
And even maybe go south a little bit, if you could. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Is there anyone of the public that would like to speak to this with that additional information? Seeing no one coming forward, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and ask if the applicant has any response to the one matter that was brought forward by Mr. Snyder with regard to the size of the lots.
So what was the question about the size of the lots?
Again, it was a little bit of not sure the direction they weren't going. The basic comment is that if it's a 60-foot wide lot and a lot of the other lots in the area may be 80 or 90 feet, they were concerned that, they'd rather see 3 lots than 4 lots. But I did explain to him that the zoning, which was not on the development design right now wasn't being discussed. But if it did change, we did have a 60-foot frontage minimum requirement, and it potentially could be 4 lots onto the property, and he indicated he'd prefer 3 to preserve the character of the area.
And we intend to be able to abide by any of the rules and regulations that are in the RL code. As far as increasing or decreasing the density, we don't see that necessary, considering that entire neighborhood abides by that same density. So that's. Do you guys have anything about any questions about that?
Any questions of the applicant?
Because basically that would be a spot zone, right? We wouldn't be complying with the rest of the zone. And if I remember correctly, that entire neighborhood, for the most part, and including the master plan for that neighborhood, is RL, even though it is currently zoned AL. So in essence, we would be bringing it up to the, what the city envisions that neighborhood as being, and dividing it and allowing for up to 4 units per acre would just be in compliance with the future use that the city sees for that neighborhood.
If I were to interpret the comment, which is then me trying to translate what I think they might have been thinking, they wanted something between AL and RL as a zone.
Yeah,
and I tried to explain that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
We don't have one.
It's like the RL minus.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, and one thing, we have spoken, I myself haven't, but Chad has spoken to some of the neighbors, just to get their feelings of how they would react to something like this, because we didn't want to proceed if all the neighbors were categorically opposed to it. The feedback that we received so far is positive, and we anticipate that there might be some people who would be opposed to it, but given A, the size of the lot, and B, the master plan for that particular neighborhood, and C, that the fact that the rest of that street is all zoned RL, we think that it would be within the city's plan to go in that direction.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Any other questions for staff or the applicant?
Can you tell me the size of the lots? Looks like they're to the south are all residential or agricultural?
They are.
And what are the size of those lots?
Off the top of my head, I don't have that information.
That lot is 0.36, so it's not a half acre. That lot is 0.49, just under
Which
a
is
half
also
acre.
not half acre.
We round up though, right, Corey? That's what we do.
And the other lot is 0.45.
Wow, good to know. Okay.
Obviously, they could do some sort of assemblage, right, in the future if they wanted to maintain that, but any further subdivision wouldn't be possible as far as I understand the AL code, right?
And for fun, 1.37.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think
thank you.
you're correct. Thank you.
Corey, I have a question for you. You mentioned I think you said a 60-foot frontage on a lot for RL?
Yeah, RL lets you go to a minimum of 60 feet of frontage.
40?
40 is a pie-shaped lot, so what you have on a pie-shaped lot, like a cul-de-sac lot, you have 40 at the street.
So when we did the
curve,
Cheetos Johnson.
but it's 60 at the setback in the RL.
So for Cheetos Johnson, we had to go to the RL to get this 40.
That's what they were struggling with, is why they wanted to rezone from the RM, which was mandatory 60.
So if it's a square rectangular lot, it's got to be 60.
It's got to be 60, but if you're on a pie shape for a cul-de-sac, The street curb frontage is 40, but the setback at 25 feet has to be 60.
Is there one, what's it for agricultural?
It is a straight, what's agricultural?
60.
Straight 60 in
For
agriculture.
80.
Yeah.
So for point of information, the other lots up this street are all 90.
90?
Those are 90, yeah.
And I think that's what the caller was indicating. They're larger frontages per se.
Well, and the one to the south of it does not look
The south is,
extremely
that one's gotta be,
large frontage there, but
that's gotta be grandfathered in or something, huh?
Yeah, but you got your whole neighborhood.
Any other questions for staff?
That's just 60.
About 60.
so that
on
would be the size of the frontage.
Okay. Any further comments or debate? Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I would like to add a comment of debate before I make a motion.
Sure.
I feel as though that this particular request is consistent with the general plan. I know that the council has expressed a different vision for agricultural zones in the recent past, so I don't know what they'll do up there, but personally, I feel like this is consistent with the general plan, especially considering the size of those lots to the south was a surprise to me. With that being said, I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to recommend approval of the zone map amendment of 2026 North Main Street from agricultural low to residential low, with the suggested reasons for this action, 1 through 2, is found in the staff report.
I second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Commissioner Johnson was saying, that don't be surprised if the council has strong feelings on a certain way with this one. I think that, you know, in general, this one, I don't have issues with it. I am really interested to see a conceptual site plan, a
Yeah.
subdivision plan. I think that's where the rubber's going to meet the road. But don't be surprised to see this one either come back or not, so.
Okay.
Anyone else want to add some speculation, make Lisa really enjoy her night?
Are we taking bets
Just
on
kidding.
the floor?
Okay. Any other comments or debate? We'll go ahead and vote. We'll start here, Commissioner.
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Next item on the agenda is also scheduled for a public hearing. This is a preliminary subdivision, final site plan for Parish Creek Plan Development at 1030 North, 950 West. Turn the time to staff.
Okay. Thank you again. So you guys might remember from March, Parish Creek PDO was approved on March 21st from the City Council. And things have been moving along. A little bit has changed since the last site plan and the PDO that we saw. So previously, just to catch you guys up on the changes that were made, these two, do you want me to remind you of what was happening before? Okay. So this is on the north side, 950 west, 1033 north. In between Legacy and I-15. And so previously, these two on the southeastern side of the lot were two buildings, and then this one was a little bit bigger, so this one has shrunk a little bit. This is now one larger building, and a little bit of the landscaping has changed just from the conceptual plan. This is now the final site plan. So those were the major changes, and we didn't think that those were quite significant enough to recommend a PDO amendment. Just based on the size of the buildings and a little bit of the layout, we did not find that they were quite significant enough.
Yeah, the term is substantially complies with the conceptual plan. They took 2 buildings, put them into one, and substantially reduced the large building. If you remember, we had the discussion about the wall facing Legacy on that building. They've taken that building, which is long and linear, and reduced it, but it will be a multi-story building, just so you know. It's not a single-story building now.
So
But the
this,
layout is generally the same.
yeah, so Building B used to be a majority warehouse, and now they have reduced it in size and is now mostly office instead. So the use has changed as well for that building alone. So just working through the staff report, there were a few significant recommendations for this plan. The architecture, in their narrative, the PDO was approved off of the developer's narrative that was submitted in March, and they did state that they would make protective covenants to protect the architectural integrity of the project, and that goes with the pedestrian walkways and the aesthetics that were promised in the PDO. So that is yet to be submitted. The parking, there were some issues with the parking, if you'll recall, on the conceptual, that it seemed to be very overparked. I have triple-checked all of these calculations now, and they're only over by about 10 parking stalls for the whole site, which isn't too bad at all. So all of their parking was on count this time. The landscaping and the pedestrian pathways are where we're kind of having the most discussions about. Let me bring you the landscaping plan. So in terms of ordinances, they have more than enough trees and shrubs. There's also a preliminary subdivision application with this, and per site, all of their landscaping percentages are well above the 10% necessary. So in terms of the amount of landscaping, they have went well above and beyond what is necessary for a normal industrial zone. The issues are with the placement of the trees and the shrubs, and discrepancies within what the planners want and what the county wants and what Public Works want and what the developer wants. So because of the wetlands and the creeks on this site, they're just the placement along the creeks. There are some.
Yeah, Cassie got hit with this at the last minute, so she's trying to adapt to what was said. We got this information Friday between the county and the Public Works Director. See this bank of trees on the southern end? That lines the large ditch. They were discussing whether they wanted to pipe the ditch and put it in a box culvert. And they've come back and said, well, the price tag's pretty expensive. So the county at this point is saying, well, they're willing to give the flood control easement along there, but the county is saying, well, if we pull in our backhoes to clean that ditch with all those trees there, we have a problem. So they want to discuss the relocation and changing amount of those trees along that ditch. That's the county's concern. The other place that they're a little concerned about is this other building here where you see the trees adjacent to the wetlands in Bernard Creek. That's another place that the county is weighing in on their access easement and so forth. So had Cassie tried to address that in a condition of your report, is to go to the flood control in the county and find out how that was going to take place and satisfy that flood control expectations of the county. The other place, and then Cassie can remind me if I've forgotten it, you see the road here coming in is extra wide. You have a boulevard look. And you basically have 2 lanes of traffic each direction. The idea is if one side shuts down, the other can function as a 2-way lane. The engineer and the Public Works Director want it clarified that boulevard area is maintained by the private landowner. He doesn't want his Public Works crew out there trying to maintain that. We do that with we maintain some places on Marketplace, and it's difficult. The Parks Department does it. So they want clarity and understanding on the subdivision, and then the CC&Rs that will be associated with it, or a notation on the plat that center landscape island, even though it's in the public right-of-way and is sitting inside of city's property, the obligation of maintenance and taking care of it will be the developer. The other place that's kind of, I would say, is more in flux, because the planners now kind of put their thinking cap on and just say, well, I don't know. And believe it or not, we had the city engineer kind of leaning on our side here a little bit. Our right-of-way ends at the curb line, so the sidewalk system along that road, park strip and everything is on private ground. And what the Public Works Director, Randy, is concerned about is if those trees are too close to the curb line in the gutter, we can have, I mean, this is typical of Public Works concerns, small park strips, big tree roots, ruin everything over many years. And so Randy wants to make sure that the trees are planted far enough back from the curb. And I think we put in the recommendation to you 6.5 feet was the discussion in the condition that Randy seems acceptable. The other thing he's thinking about, though, in his mind is putting the sidewalk adjacent, this is again on private ground, but putting the sidewalk adjacent to the curb and then putting all the landscaping on the backside, because he doesn't think this is a regular during the wintertime kind of issue. So I think either way is going to work. If they're 6.5 feet back, he's happy. If they want to work out a redesign with him and switch the curb, I think you just kind of weigh in on your expectations. Do you like the park strip with the walk, or do you mind a 5-foot sidewalk against the curb? But I think Randy's position is at least 6.5 feet for the tree trunk. And so, you know, by the time you balance where everything is the sidewalk in the right location is what he's trying to say, or does it need to be moved slightly? The other element that's on the table for debate is with the staff level is right now the sidewalk goes all the way around the entire road and cul-de-sac. It's off the public right of way. That's a good thing if you think about it from their standpoint. There's some boardwalks to cross through the wetlands. And obviously, the Public Works Director doesn't want to be taking care of the boardwalks as part of a public system. So he's fine with it all staying on the private ground and the private circulation. Where the discussion is, and I think the developer can weigh in, is this southern tree boundary. If the trees go away, we still have on their plans a sidewalk system or a pathway system carrying you from the road out to the end of their property. But the end of their property doesn't quite make it to 1250 West. So there's a gap. It's a state right-of-way. There's room between the state right-of-way and the very pinnacle of this area to go down the right-of-way and connect it onto 1250. We have to go down far enough that the bridge ramp coming down, you don't interfere with that. The problem is how do you make the crossing over the ditch? You know, getting a permit from the county to do either a steel bridge over or box culvert that area so that you can walk through and make it to 1250 West. I think that's something that is not fully decided upon. So I think that's something to weigh in and have a discussion about.
So on their conceptual plan, this sidewalk did go all the way up and connect to 1250, and then now on their final site plan, it just kind of ends abruptly. So I don't know if they just found out that was too expensive and decided to completely scratch it, but it did.
Yeah, you run into the ramp if you go. Now you got to jump up over the wall of the ramp and get onto the road.
But that was a part of their narrative during the conceptual plan and a part of their PDO approval that this area would enhance pedestrian and bike connectivity in this area because 1250 leads into the Legacy Parkway right up here. So we think it's a great opportunity for that connection if possible, but know that is being discussed, that it was approved like they did say that they were going to do it in their conceptual, and now it's kind of being negotiated, so that is definitely something up for discussion.
And I forgot to mention, Randy's suggestion is he says if you make that crossing, which the box culvert or a steel bridge obviously is an expense, Randy is saying this northeastern end of the sidewalk system, because you have a sidewalk connecting these buildings right to the cul-de-sac bulb. Then you can hit that cul-de-sac bulb, follow it all the way around down to the trail over to 1250 West. So eliminating this east side sidewalk and what's needed there is maybe an option too. to bear some of the costs of making the connection.
Corey, can you explain to me why there's no sidewalk or anything on 1250 West? So is that really an inviting pedestrian access?
That is correct. UDOT, under their bridge, did include a west side pedestrian path. When you come back off of the bridge heading southbound, you run into no sidewalk after you pass the Hogan subdivision site. And so you have these large park strips. We have a 88 feet right away going down 1250 West, and we have large park strips before you actually hit the actual property line. So, early plans, this is back to the goal of community pathways element of the plan. We've made a connection from our thought pattern, we've made a connection to the trail going south. We need to make a connection going north. So someday we hope to connect Parish Lane and 1250 West on the west side to go all the way up, whether we use grant funding or some other federal funds or state funds, and connect it to the 1250 West Bridge, so it now connects to the Legacy Trail. So, but right now, you're correct. There's no sidewalks on 1250 West, and the industrial used to not have a sidewalk requirement.
But as you can see, it does start on the bridge, just on the other side. So the connection would probably come more south here, but
Yeah.
then over the bridge, it does start, it's just on the other side.
Yeah, so
So it's not necessarily the most best connection, but it is possible and is there.
So if you zoom in really close, this green area is where the pathway would come down. This is the drainage going underneath. They've got to bridge this area, and you can see the Jersey barriers are along. So it has to be connected across this ditch in some manner, and it's a large storm drain ditch. And then this is all right of way on the state. And we could come to eventually this corner and cross, something of that nature to make that connection.
Well, that would be up to the state to do that.
You'd have to joint with the state to do it, just like the Legacy Trail heading south is on state right of
Where
way.
would the other connection to the trail be that you were mentioning, now that we've got the picture?
On the bridge, right?
Yeah, if you go to the bridge, the sidewalk currently ends at the bottom here where the bridge is, so we eventually need to make that connection here along this property in the state right of way.
And then south of there.
Yeah, your trail sits right here.
It's the sidewalk to nowhere.
I'm trying to think because I drive that road several times a week because my daughter, they dance over there.
Oh, yeah, you're the traffic problem. We get those calls.
Well, all I'm saying is I'm there a lot. And I see people along that bridge every single time because
Have you
there's-
seen me at that dance time?
No.
You dance over there too?
No, I
No,
run.
do you do the
I run the trail.
the GP or the I think it's like a
The CrossFit.
CrossFit thing.
No.
So
I just, in between meetings, when we don't have the work sessions, I often run up the trail.
There you
either
go.
one, DNRG. So I cross over the bridge and use the pedestrian ramp, but I
Yeah.
won't cross over. I actually run against traffic because trying to cross back and forth, it gets really,
Well, I'm trying to figure how the people
Dicey.
get there because I see kids last time I saw teenagers, just today I saw teenagers on it, just hanging out. And then almost every other time I see people running up and I'm trying to figure out on that north side of the bridge, how do they get there? If there's no, because this is obviously an old map.
right. How do they get to the trail?
How do they get to the sidewalk?
There is no, it's missing.
Road.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They're there. So
They're
this
there.
tell me how this happens. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the 1250 bridge was constructed by the part of the Legacy project. They included the one-sided sidewalk system, and it just ends on both sides.
It's part of the state's plan to get you part of the way there and then let the city bear the rest of the burden?
Yeah, I mean,
You don't have to answer that.
it is, incremental segments is what they fund. And then cities come back in and make the case for completing the connections.
Thank you for that report. Any other questions for staff at this time?
Okay, sorry, we still have.
Oh, we're not done?
Do you have more?
Or you want to
So
talk
those were
about
the
the
pedestrian
subdivision?
pathways and landscape issues that came up a little bit last minute that need to be discussed for the site plan. And then, like I mentioned, they're also in their preliminary subdivision phase. Things look to be a little bit on track for the most part. Their biggest concern at this point is that the soils report that was submitted to us was from 2014, the previous applicant who owned this lot and was developing it. So that needs to be updated before final, which could, change things minimally. But the soils report is out of date, so.
Yeah, just so you know, logistically, they're proceeding, the final site plan's approving, but they're proceeding with their preliminary subdivision because they want to get back with their final, and all of the bonding and construction plans for the project will be at the final subdivision. And so they're just trying to tag everything together so they can pull it all into one element. But one of the issues is that soils report was designed for a different expectation of buildings on the original plan. And so the city engineer and public works director wanted updated in relation to this project regarding the fill that's on the property. How adequate is the fill? Is it compacted necessary to support the public road that would go in, as well as the foundations for the buildings? I mean, a one-story building, warehouse, and a four-story office may change the recommendations of the soil report.
Makes sense. Okay. Anything
That's it,
else,
yeah.
guys? Didn't mean to cut you off, sorry. All right. I'd like to invite the applicant to come forward at this time and probably have a few questions for you, and you may want to respond to some of the things that have been raised here.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Roy with Tom Stewart Construction and Remonite Properties.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Any comments on some of the issues that were raised in the staff report?
Yeah, definitely. So we have been discussing the soils report, and I have been communicating with other geotech engineering companies and getting quotes for new soils reports. So we definitely agree with the new soils report because, 3 years of fill material, that earth, getting snowed on, rained on, moisture, and then drying out, going through that cycle, multiple times a year. The soil is definitely a different condition now, and it will definitely help, with the layout of the buildings and to be a better solution for all of us. So the soils report is definitely in the process. And then another thing I like to comment too was the landscaping as well. The trees along the south side there, that ravine. I believe that we have, what was it, 10%? Is that the landscape requirement on the lot? I mean, we've exceeded the landscaping, and we can definitely work around some of the county's requests, whatever we need to do to work with the county. I mean, there's multiple parties involved, but I think that there's definitely a solution in that.
What about the sidewalk issue that we've been discussing? Any comments on that?
Yeah, so we wanted to tie it into, get it connected to the Legacy Trail, taking that sidewalk along the south end. And then, like Corey said, with the Jersey barriers there connecting into 1250 North, if you're going to go around those Jersey barriers to the south, one, you're crossing the creek, and then two, you're on to the next property. I think it's Hogan. Is it Hogan there that owns that property there?
They do own the subdivision of south, but where we see is there's a significant right-of-way under the state that you could run the trail down to and get there.
So yeah, that was kind of a dead end there, just to, open for review, conversation, discussion about what's best to do there.
Now, originally, you did have it on your conceptual site plan to make that connection. Was it just that you realized that that the difficulty of crossing the creek and some of the,
I'm not sure if it was the creek or if it was, the actual ramp elevation and blockades of the road. I think was the same preposition with the previous developer too. I think they had the same idea, and so we'd kind of just piggybacked off of their idea.
realizing later that it was not such a good idea.
Yep, exactly.
Can you tell me, have you looked into the types of street trees that you'd like to plant?
I have not. We have left it to Foresight Engineering, our landscape architect, and trust their better judgment.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I invite you back. Okay, this matter has been scheduled as a public hearing. I'd like to invite anyone who would like to come and speak on this matter to come forward at this time. Seeing no one coming forward, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Further questions by the commissioners for the staff or the applicant?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I take a little bit of issue with the street tree requirement, because when people plant street trees now, I think we're more aware than we were 40 years ago, and a lot of the issues that we're seeing with these trees breaking up sidewalks and stuff, we are aware of. And I think there's very clear guidance on how wide the trunks need to be and how far down to plant them. And I'm sure that if they're using current landscape architects, that they would be able to figure that out. So I actually don't like the idea of saying that they have to be 6.5 feet away from the street curb, because I feel like there's an argument for street trees and for the ambiance that it creates in an area. We could put in, if Public Works is not really excited about that, we can put in a requirement that says that they're approved, some sort of a requirement that that they follow the street tree guideline, engineering guidelines or landscape architect guidelines. I don't know, something like that.
Let me give you what the ordinance, the Public Works ordinance is where the park strip trees, right now you can plant trees in the park strip today. There is a selection species type associated with that current Public Works ordinance.
Yes.
And so that would still be in place. The interesting part about this one in the discussion is none of these trees are in the park strip owned by the city, because there is, the edge of the right-of-way is at the back of curb. So now all of the trees now are on private property, and that's where he is trying to recommend, and you saw in our report, the 6.5 feet, because he wants to keep that distance away from the curb.
Still make it a condition.
And then, go from there. So, it's something that they're all on private ground. They're not in the park strip. He's just recommended that we put in the 6.5 feet to keep it away from the curb. So the question is are you okay with this landscaping plan, or do you okay with at least placing them 6.5 feet away?
Just to be clear, their park strip, according to their landscaping plan, is actually quite wide, and so they do have trees in the park strip, but 6.5 feet would actually about be the middle of the park strip.
Okay.
And so Rainey prefers 6.5 be the minimum, but that would also about be the middle of the park strip, because it's like kind of a big one for this cul-de-sac. So
it
it
still
actually
would
seems to
be
be pretty fine, and they do have trees on both sides of the sidewalk, so it would be in the middle of the park strip and on the other side.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, that's good to know.
So I assume that there'll be smaller trees in the park strip, and maybe, from the sides of the landscaping plan, it looks like the bigger ones are going to be on the other side of the sidewalk. And the 6.5 feet was about in the middle.
Well,
so that
and
works.
I think that's great that it's in the middle, and I think it's great that there's a park strip. I just feel like that's a little bit of an undue burden placing upon the property owner and the landscape architect if they've thought through this. I mean, we could put something in there that says that they abide by ordinance recommended species and whatever within park strips. But I don't know if that gives them a lot of flexibility that it's exactly, 6.5 feet or whatever. And I'm guessing that they probably would want to put it in the middle of the park strip anyway. I mean, I don't know what their plan is, but they're trained in landscape architecture, and that's why they do
Yeah,
that.
I think they're planned for about the middle of that space, which is pretty close to that.
So
number.
is the point that you're making, though, because the park strip is private, that the ordinance would not apply?
Correct.
Okay. And so we have to, we can't really just say in accordance with the ordinance, because.
Right, because the ordinance deals with an actual city-owned park strip.
City-owned park strip. So I think we do have to come up with some rules, I guess, rather than just reference to the ordinance, maybe just recite the same language that's in the ordinance.
I like that.
Yeah.
Do you think that's?
I like the idea of just saying, whatever the same rules are that are in that
Yeah.
street tree ordinance. And I would also maybe say the 6.5 foot thing maybe isn't a big deal as long as it is, that 6.5 thing doesn't push it out of the center, as long as it is the center, because, what you don't want to have happen is something that's 14 feet wide, and then because you do 6.5
Exactly, and I
feet,
don't
you're
want,
like-
I don't
and
want to require that, and then if they're, I just feel like that's a really,
Well, you don't want to unbalance their private sidewalk investment either and
Yeah.
put them so close to that.
Well, that's
that it
that's
ruins
what I
that.
mean. Like, if it is the middle, great, then that's fine. But if 6.5 feet ends up being, a little off center, then you're looking at it going, that looks
they
silly.
followed the requirement.
I did the requirement. Way to go, yay, government.
So I feel like that's a space where we can
Yeah,
maybe
I think-
put that exact
I
language in.
think, I think Randy's, as we talk so times, we look at it such a different angle, but yet we're all on the same page. I think you could just say, that all trees be planted in the center between the curb and the place sidewalk as per plans. And then whether it's 6.5 feet, 5 feet, 6 foot, 8 inches
Yeah.
is irrelevant at that point.
And then we can include the other requirement that it follows, that we actually just use the language from the ordinance, like the chair suggested, so that it follows the species, and so there aren't these problems
Yeah,
long-term.
what I would do if you choose to go that direction is that they can use a tree species allowed by the ordinance or as recommended by the landscape architect, because I'm assuming that there are some plantings here that are not, we have a small list, and the
Right, that's
landscape
true.
architect has a lot. Or as recommended that meets the intent of that.
Right. That meets the intent. I like that.
Are there other questions for staff?
Yeah, I have a quick question. We talked about, was it building B, the one that's been reduced in size, but now it's taller, I think,
Yes.
right? Last time this came here, we had significant amount of discussion about how that backs up against legacy, and so we wanted to look nice and everything. With the change in size, there is still kind of some stipulation to make that, look good, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's,
Well, the problem with it before was that it was those large garage warehouse doors.
Yeah.
So I assume that it's an office, sorry, I have the renderings. It's going to look different, but. Find the right one here. So also this is something to be noted, that I didn't notice until later, that this building E is actually going to face, not Legacy, I-15.
I-15.
So you can kind of see that from this rendering, that the frontage of the building is actually away from the cul-de-sac, and so the warehouse doors will actually be facing the cul-de-sac and the development as opposed to the highway. So that's just something to note.
all right. I just want to make sure that with the, change and stuff, that we didn't lose sight of
Right.
a significant amount of discussion we had last time, so.
I don't know which one it is.
Sorry, when all the buildings look the same. This could be building B.
Is it that one? No. Roy, which building is it?
I don't know how you could figure it out, which attachment.
Well, on your one side, I can see it sitting in the distance, but I just don't know
Yeah.
if we have an actual elevation
But that right there, you know,
That's a style. Though.
yeah. Yeah, basically the style is going, that right there is one of the other buildings that has been two-story office from the beginning. And so now building B is just going to match like what those other two buildings are. So like Cassie said, we're getting rid of kind of the blank, long industrial feel of a blank side of a building and kind of turning it into office type building.
Okay.
So it will look a lot better from that west side, from the Legacy Highway view.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Also, another recommendation on landscaping from Public Works was because of the concerns about these trees on the southern end of the lot, if they wanted to keep their count of trees as high as they have it now, they could move them to this edge so it kind of surrounds the boundary of the property instead. And that way, those trees would kind of beautify the frontage of Legacy as well.
That's a good idea.
So that's another recommendation for their landscaping plan, because these seem to maybe be a problem area for trees.
Do we have that in our, anywhere?
I don't know if I put that in. I don't remember it being a specific condition, but just that the landscaping plan generally would be probably reassessed at this point.
Because I overcomplicate things, just so you know, the original Parish Creek, because this is across from the shorelands, we minimize the use of the trees along Legacy for the purposes of tying it in with the other side. I don't think it's not, because it's industrial high, so you could use the trees there. But the Parish Creek originally didn't put trees there because in the shorelands, we discourage the use of lots of trees in an upland environment. So originally, we were trying to tie the both sides of Legacy and design elements together. But if you want the trees there, that's great. I don't want to.
More trees.
I don't want to take on Randy's role yet.
I think that's great. I think that's a great recommendation that he made. But I think the Directive 3 does say reconsider adjust the placement of trees. So
Yeah.
maybe that's it. I was going to ask one more thing too. Do you know how active those wetlands are right now? How do they assess this is wetlands, this is active, or
The Army
like,
Corps.
what do they do?
What they do is the Army Corps will go out, they study, first of all, the type of plants that are located there and see if they're typical of a wetland environment. And then they do a delineation on where this is waters from Bernard Creek, so we're calling it Parish Creek, but it's really Bernard Creek that feeds this area. And they do a delineation on where the edges of that successful wetland ecosystem exists. And so they're following the Army Corps' delineation that's approved for the site.
And so those will be untouched, or how will those work?
They are to remain untouched. They can be, depending on what they plan to do, there's some modifications the Army Corps will approve, but the permit, I believe, Roy can say this is generally an untouched area of natural wetland.
That's good to know.
Great. Any other discussion, questions? Very good. This is a two-part application. One is a final site plan. The other is for preliminary subdivision. We need to handle these separately, obviously. So the Chair will entertain a motion with regard to the final site plan.
Chair, I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the final site plan for Parish Creek Business Park at 1030 North, 950 West, with directives 1, 2, and amended 3 that will read. What you wrote down there.
Abide by the limits of the ordinance with regard to tree species or as otherwise recommended by the landscape architecture.
And sort of how Corey said it too,
That
with
would be, that would meet with the
Intent.
The same
the intent
of the ordinance. Did you get that?
Yes, I will double check.
With amended 3, and then 4 through 9. Reasons for action A through C.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? I think you should name it the Bernard Creek Business Park. I live on Bernard Creek, and we hold it very sacred.
It just doesn't roll off the tongue.
I know.
I did bring that up with my boss, and he said no. As a former resident of Centerville, I love the canyons, I am familiar with Bernard Creek, and I love the falls up there, but Parish Creek does sound.
Yeah, it just sounds more Centerville-ish, doesn't it?
I do have a question if you want to keep condition 5 as stated. Because I did say or as amended and approved by the Planning Commission. If you guys don't want to keep the pedestrian pathway to 1250 North as a condition for approval.
Does anyone want to make an amendment to my motion?
Well, let's just discuss it for a second here. So what condition 5 says, as I understand it, is that the pedestrian pathways will be as stated in the developer's narrative.
Of the
The
PDO.
developer's narrative being the narrative that was associated with the conceptual
With the PDO plan, yeah.
PDO plan.
Which required the bridge.
And that connects.
And
to-
they-
Required a connection.
Yeah,
Some sort of connection, not necessarily a bridge.
that's, probably a bridge, but yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's some complications to it, but if it doesn't happen now, when does it happen, right?
I like the idea of the connectivity. I also like the idea of them being flexible to figure out how that works. I don't want to give them such rigid standards that they have to do it one specific way. So if we say, as stated in their narrative, does that mean that they are bound by how they originally stated it? Or can there be some flexibility with?
I mean, it doesn't say how that they would make that connection in their narrative. It just says that
They would be
a connection to
connected.
1250 would be made.
I feel comfortable with that in my motion, if someone would like to.
I agree.
I move that we amend number 5 to read the expected pedestrian pathways and connections shall be provided as stated in the developer's narrative, and strike the rest.
You want the related easements?
Oh, strike the rest of that sentence and then pick up at any related easements and continue with the rest of number 5 as in staff report.
Second.
And moved and seconded that we amend the motion by the amendment to condition 5 as stated by Commissioner Johnson. Any discussion, further discussion on that? Vote on the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we have before us the motion of Commissioner Wright as amended. Any further discussion? Let's go ahead and vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
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 Okay, very good. Let's then move to motion 2 regarding the preliminary subdivision. Chair will entertain a motion unless there's further discussion.
I had one request on
Yes.
condition number 3 on the protective covenants. Let me see. Just make an additional comment. So currently reads, the protective covenants shall be prepared and submitted to protect the architectural integrity of the property and site as part of final subdivision approval. I wanted to address here their obligation to maintain the landscape medians, and also had a question, are they still proposing those wooden sidewalks? And
Yes.
okay, so I don't know if this is the place, but basically I would suggest either here or an additional condition that the protective covenants and/or a plat note shall indicate that the developer / property owner of the business park shall address maintenance of the landscape median and the wooden sidewalks as part of final subdivision approval.
I like that.
I'd suggest we put it in as part of 3.
Okay,
just
so
so
if you
there's
wanted
not
in
an-
3, it would say protective covenants and/or plat note shall be prepared and submitted to protect the architectural integrity of the property and site, as well as to address the developer / owner of the business park's obligation to maintain the landscape median and wooden sidewalks
As part of.
as part of final subdivision approval.
Yeah, okay,
I,
thank you.
I'm gonna make a motion like that. I hereby make a motion for the planning commission to approve the preliminary subdivision plat for the Parish Creek Business Park located at 1030 North, 950 West, subject to conditions 1 and 2 in the staff report, condition 3 as recommended by Lisa, and then 4, 5, and 6 from the staff report with suggested reasons for action A through C.
Second.
Commissioner Logan seconded. Okay. Any further discussion or debate? Let's go ahead and vote. Commissioner Helgeson?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much. Always been a pleasure having you here. Looking forward to that new development, actually. It's nice down there. Oh, yeah. Okay, going to excuse Commissioner Johnson, I guess.
Thank you.
And we'll continue with item number 3 on the agenda, which is also scheduled for public hearing. This is zone text amendment, construction, sales, and service in a CM zone. And we'll turn the time, and the city council initiated this matter, so we'll turn the time over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for fun, staff picked this fancy word that I'm not even sure I know exactly what it means. Staff's providing you a non-aligned recommendation, meaning that we didn't position ourselves wholly in this matter, but I did give you, push come to shove, what staff would say. This, again, was initiated by the city council. It was actually at their last meeting, so you have a report at the end of your meeting that they initiated this action. So it was kind of interesting how that just coupled into the same meeting. So we're here already to talk about their request to amend the CM zone in its table of uses. Just by way of background, I introduced to you, letting you know that there's current discussions with the fire station on Main Street. There's an interested electrical contractor that would like to purchase the facility. He's had to look heavily at our overlay zone, what constitutes changing it to the new standards for building design and so forth. But one of the first elements that was discussed is that the use is no longer allowed on Main Street. So in that discussion with the city, the mayor approached the council and asked the council if they would sponsor this text amendment, and they did so. However, as staff usually tries to do, is caveat that that is a specific interest and not giving any less validity to that specific interest. We also have to put on our hats on the longer horizon vision and making sure that we're not missing something in allowing a narrow focus view of the request. Is this good for our CM zones? Tried to provide you a lot of context from the ordinance requirement, because this is a crossover. You know, you're looking at a general plan amendment, and so we're looking at the general plan, or not general plan amendment. We're looking, this is a text amendment, and we're looking at the general plan for guidance, sorry. And what's interesting is you have 3 different neighborhood plans that talk about, well, 4 different areas. You have the general plan on commercial, which is just simply saying provide the needs and services and goods of our community in a highly designed manner. We have also the southeast neighborhood, which is the dividing line is Main Street. We have the southwest neighborhood, the dividing is Main Street. Why is Main Street important? Because Main Street for the south corridor is our only place of the CM zone. And then we have the South Main Street overlay that ties the 2 neighborhood plans into the corridor. So I just tried to set that up, that there's all of this policy about what's going on. And even though we're talking about the CM zone, the CM zone is a narrowly placed and used district in the city and primarily affects those neighborhood plans with the overlay. You know, the overall caption of construction sales and services, it's pretty broad. Typical uses: lumber yards, home improvement centers, lawn and garden supply stores, construction equipment, and we get to this place, construction and trade contractors' offices and storage yards, which is different than the corporate offices of some entity where office use is allowed. So if you look at Ascent Construction that used to be in the Main and Center before they built in Farmington, that was their corporate offices. It was not their contractor's storage yard. That was their corporate offices. And so, you know, it includes what the request is that currently is not allowed in the CM zone. We try to give you the different regulations that kind of come into play because it's such a narrowly used zone and specifically adjacent to the neighborhoods along Main Street. Storage is a restriction. This becomes an issue where you usually see the rear of the lot ends up being your storage yard. In this case, the rear of the lots are going to be adjacent to the neighborhoods, which then fits outdoor storage has to be 50 feet away. So that competes with the placement of buildings and parking lots. That becomes important because when you think about the overlay zone, if we're going to go with the design, we want the buildings out front and the parking lots tucked behind. So this would be parking lot on the rear yard, the outdoor sales in the middle of the lot, and the building on the front of the lot. It would be really the simplistic design of the overlay district requirements. But so as we go through, your primary guidance is the general plan. I give you the definitions and the storage requirements so that you understand how the CM zone works. You know, from our standpoint, you know, this is not something that I could say there's so one definitive way it's obvious. I've gotten in trouble several times and differed with many opinions about our overlay district. We do have I don't want to call it stagnant because I don't think it's stagnant. We've had some recent development, but it's been a tough area to revitalize, put it that way. It's doing well in some ways, but there are plenty of properties ripe for development at some point in time. The overlay that we put in place was incentivized. It created a lot of angst in the community, but it was incentivized by giving mixed use and residential as an incentive. Those densities have been parsed down, so you know there's a question still yet from my mind: is that original overlay incentive still viable at the densities that have been cut down from the original? Could be. I don't want to say it isn't, but you know, density, intensity are all issues that make values change and provide opportunities. Does that create a slowdown with the incentive plan? Potentially, maybe not. We know that there's a slowdown from lots of redevelopment. So, you know, there might be a long time before Main Street really reaches the services that are local to the community. I mean, how many dentists, how many salons can you locate on that corridor to service a population that's, you know, going to 16.5 now to 20,000 at the end of the neighborhood plan? So, you know, that's a tough call because we want to redevelop it. You have somebody that might be interested in taking over a building. In taking over that building, it'll probably leave the building as is, not redevelop, but leave it as is. That's not a bad thing. At least have a use in the building until the market can ripe for that. So that's a concern. But we also have, you know, my view of the past ordinance changes, primarily 2003, they went through and really parsed out vehicle sales, repairs, the contractor's office, or the construction sales disappeared with that ordinance. The controversy of car dealership and outdoor uses of the car dealership have been, you know, for a long while was problematic. So the city did seem to go through and use the 2003 ordinance to balance the uses with the neighborhoods and take away a lot of those ideas. But, you know, it's hard when I look at the blacksmith shop picture right out here in City Hall, and there's a vocational trade right on Main Street. And then we go and talk about historic district and historic uses, and what do we want? And, Cook Builders is still there. They're not allowed. They're non-conforming. Tingy and Larson Electric have obviously gone by the way. They still maintain an office, but they're not an actively engaged construction company along there. But it has been historic uses of local business owners. And so, staff could come to you honestly and say, this is the predominant leaning direction that you should go. For enforcement purposes, sure, I have a place. Get anything that removes those conflicts so I don't have to knock on neighbors' doors and give them the letter about they're causing problems and noise of neighbors and get into those fights, and they use staff as the whip on each other when they get upset with each other. But that's kind of what we do when you're balancing a neighborhood and a local commercial district. Those tensions are going to occur. But I will say, based on policy and the definition that does talk about lumber yards, this is what can go there. So today it may be a small user. Tomorrow it might be somebody trying to push it to a different level of intensity. Obviously there's some codes in place where the storage yard will go, but I also see that really you allow this use but you don't allow the storage yard use to it. I don't know the balance. So push comes to shove, we lean on the denial part, but I did try to provide you a balanced option to consider it as a redevelopment scenario. My list of the negatives seemed to go a little longer than the positives, so I think when I wrote that, that's why I ended up leaning towards the denial. And I switched back and forth as I wrote, but by the time I got done with all the definitions, the research, drafting some findings, the leaning of findings that I drafted led me to say, push comes to shove, we lean towards denial. But I don't think that's the worst thing to not go with that. So I'm being gentle.
Thank you. Good political answer. Sound like a lawyer. Okay, questions for staff? Okay, the applicant is not present. Would you like to speak to this?
Yeah.
Sure, please, come forward.
Public hearing, right?
My name's Kyle Shoup. I work with, I'm an owner and partner with Shoup Electric. So just a little bit of a background. So this, of course, the South Davis Metro Fire was looking for an option to relocate to a newer building. And so Mayor Cutler actually approached us knowing that we've been looking for, somewhere to move from. We're presently located down near the Bountiful Glass building down in those warehouse office space right now. But the way that our company has worked is, we're an electrical contractor, but our hope is that we're kind of a cut above what you typically see in a contractor, in that we're the way that we approach everything is the best of our abilities as far as our designs, everything else. So we were looking for a way when the mayor approached us and said, hey, this may be an option. We approached we met with the fire chief and looked at the building and thought there was a great potential to keep our presence in Centerville. We've been looking for land and places to build forever. We've been longtime residents of Centerville. My dad's born here, raised here, and he's going to die here, right next door to where he lives now. So, so anyways, we looked at that building and thought, what, this could be a great fit. We don't store, granted, this text amendment doesn't just include us; it includes everybody going forward. So we totally understand that, but we don't keep a lot of stuff outdoors other than just our vans when they're loading up in the morning and when they're going out. And so after hours, very quiet, and everything else, there's not a high density of vehicle in and out, other than just early in the morning and in the afternoon. So So that was our objective, is to come and find out, you know, is it possible for us to take vacancy in the building, the fire house. You know, our intentions are to give it a facelift, not to change the structure per se, but just, you know, the old faded reddish pink brick that's there now. It's 20 some odd years old now, but, you know, we just wanted to give that a facelift, and, you know, in hopes that we can stay, you know, here in Centerville and continue our services. We've been a staple in Centerville for 30 years now, and, you know, hope to continue to do so. So.
Okay, great.
Any questions?
Questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. This matter's been scheduled for a public hearing. If there's anyone else that would like to speak on this matter, I see a shake. Seeing no one else coming forward, close the public hearing. Comments, questions, further discussion with staff or the applicant?
I just have a question on, so you're saying it's construction, sales, and service, outdoor storage. Is that one size fits all? Does it have
Well,
to be that? Can we
the
eliminate-
definition itself, where I go down to here, where do I put it? CM zone, definition. It's a broad definition, and the construction and trade contractors' offices and storage yards. So the and is the tie. You're going to have an office and storage yard, you know, issue into there. So they're using their equipment and so forth in there. So it's the contractor's office and storage yard. So if you see it, it's lumber yards. Can lumber be stored indoors? Yes, but if it's and we have small lots, but they also store inventory. If you're looking at contractor, let's just say you have a drill rig. They do drilling. You know, they're going to bring in their offices for the drill, and they're going to park their drill rigs in a yard. Something not maybe more local, lawn and pest control. You know, they have a lot of trucks with pickup trucks and stuff with or trailers and pulled behind the trucks, whatever it might be. This is the storage yards for those equipment, supplies, everything else that's associated with there. Can it be done indoors? Of course it can be done indoors, and that's why I'm going out to the CM zone, so that you understand outdoor storage is restricted in the CM zone. It's restricted in other zones too, but particularly to outdoor storage, it is 50 feet away from every residential. That's the only place that you see where a distance restriction is done. The other places is as approved by the city. So we look at whatever use you're doing, if it's a CUP, an impact, located appropriately. CM zone says you will locate all outdoor storage 50 feet away from residential zones. So when we looked at the depths of lots, you have some varying that's going along there, but it's approximately around 200, 225 feet. So we know that we have to go, the storage yard has to be eliminated from the back 50 feet. And then you can start your outdoor storage. What I'm just trying to point out to you is now you have the competing interest of the form-based code of the South Main Street that says that our buildings will be out front. So our parking has to be located behind the building. And so now you have this competing interest. I need outdoor storage. I need parking. Parking becomes the element adjacent to the residential because the storage will be pushed to somewhere in the theoretical middle of the lot. And so I start looking at all of those parameters and say, somebody can do indoor storage. I don't want to ignore that they can't do the indoor storage. But if you're thinking the long term of the type of uses you want on Main Street and you have a permitted use, you know, that will be 50 feet away. And then they have to figure out what they're going to do with the rest of the property. You know, if it's a conditional use, then we add the other two elements in. But you're accepting that this use is appropriate to the CM zone adjacent to these residential areas.
So Corey, is it possible then to say that this type of use, the commercial, whatever they're calling it, construction and trade, whatever, construction, sales, and service, could be either permitted or conditional in the CM zone as long as there is no outdoor storage? Is there a way to put that type of stipulation on there?
Yeah, you can do that, but you know, now it all comes to the writing of ordinances, asterisk upon asterisk upon asterisk upon asterisk. And you know, my view is do you want this use in there? And if the answer is yes, and then you feel you need to add additional stipulations, we can certainly add additional stipulations. But look at how broad that definition is.
Yeah, we already have a stipulation that it's got to be 50 feet away from
Right.
residential, so, you know, it seems like one of the things we do is we put stipulations on things, so.
Right, but the use itself is anticipating yard areas. And so the issue is I'm anticipating something that's at yard areas, but saying now in reverse, it's just all indoor storage.
So we can just take out, if you're in CZC 12.34.080, just take out number 2. That would be, shall be conducted within a fully enclosed building except parking of motor vehicles.
You can do anything you want. I just, the issue is when you start placing custom asterisks everywhere, it's a burden to administrate. And so I'm trying to take you back to the base issue. Is this a type of use we actually envision on Main Street?
Well, here's part of my concern with this, and maybe eventually, when the time is right, I'd like to ask Mr. Shoup another question, but with this particular building, I know we're thinking about the whole zone.
I have to at least remind you of that.
Yes, but with this particular building, it's kind of a unique building. I mean, it's you know, so there's probably not a whole lot of uses for this building in its unique size and shape and everything, so.
But I have to remind you have vacant lot just a block down the street that is raw ground and ripe for somebody to come in and put a lumber yard and keep it 50 feet away. Is that what you want?
Yeah, but if they were to put a lumber yard in there and all of their storage is inside, that might actually be something kind of nice.
But they may not put it all inside because it's only restricted at 50 feet.
By doing this,
Well, no, because we put that in the zone and then make it go
Yeah,
all
but-
inside.
we're not changing the overlay.
Again, I'm not trying to say no, but I have to at least say, don't narrow on one specific. Ask yourself, is the definition and the expected uses what you want on Main Street? And if the answer is yes, then you can move forward to that. But the tensions, remember the tensions that come under permitted use or conditional use. You have to approve. Is this what you're expecting on Main Street, given all of the policy development that's there? And the history of it is that the city has been paring that stuff away. What you would say is let's start bringing it back.
Did you have a question?
Do you mind if I ask Mr.
No,
Shoup another
please.
question?
Please come forward.
So, in the absence of a whole bunch of contractors here,
Yeah.
thinking about kind of this question about inside storage and whatever else, in general, is inside storage feasible for something like that? And in particular, for this particular site, is inside storage only feasible?
Absolutely. Being an electrical contractor, all of the materials and equipment that we have personally are all stored inside. We don't have anything that's stored outside. So, all of our goods that we, take to the job sites and everything else is stored inside. So all that basically you're seeing is the vehicles, in the morning and at night. Most of our guys take the vehicles home. So, most of the vehicles aren't even parked on site, all night long. But all of the storage space, as it were, is pretty much just, going to be parking, because in the morning, when we've got our vans coming in, we want them to be as efficient as they can, coming in, loading their stuff and getting out and going away. So definitely, as far as a storage standpoint for us, everything, and that's why the building was so appealing with, the way that, as you mentioned, the structure is unique. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do with that, but with the driving lanes where the fire engines sit now, our intentions is to, close off the front overheads and keep them more of a fixed, permanent, fixture there, and probably update it and make it look nice, and then keep the backs accessible to be able to, load vans and everything like that. So the answer to that is yes. Storage inside was appealing to us, and because of the size of the warehouse inside, that was, and having the living quarters that's now the fire department and stuff being our office space. So it was just an appealing way to, knowing that building's pretty unique in who and what occupies it.
Thanks.
And again, you go the direction you want, because I maintain the neutral, but I see that there is a conflict. Go down to Lon Butler in the industrial zone. Small site, can't fit all his equipment. Where does he park his equipment 90% of the time?
In our parking stalls.
Yeah. So I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying when you think about the user end, the storage, the needs, the space, Lon Butler now can go to this same site, and they would repeat the behavior that we get complaints about down on the west side. Now, that's being narrow to them, because you could make the argument, well, enforce an operator to keep his equipment and so forth. I'm just saying the balance and the tension, if industrial users are complaining about Lon Butler parking their equipment everywhere because they don't have enough, and on-street parking is available to them, and they use it liberally, and then if there's a vacant somewhere else, they use it there. This is what I'm talking about, the balance of the full user. I don't think Shoup, some small end users, would probably create a problem. I just have to keep you on the broader perspective that once you do that, the tensions will rise with the adjacent neighborhood at some point in time.
Let me ask an even more fundamental question. The first time I read through the staff report, I thought, well, wait a minute. I've dealt with Shoup a lot, and I've never gone to their place of business to see their showroom and to deal with, pick out parts. What I do is I call them on the phone and say, I need something, and they come to my house with their van. And so aren't we really talking about, I mean, is this really the use that's necessary for them to have offices and keep supplies?
That's the only place they fall under.
Really? I mean, it's not just general office, can't fall under general
Yeah, and
office.
that's what we were wondering as well. Is there a classification, whereas we have to meet certain criteria of not storing certain things to classify it as office, but it's office warehouse, of course, but.
Couldn't it be specialty retail? I mean, it's.
No. Bicycle shops is not specialty retail. That's specialty retail. Donut shops. This falls under contract. So if you eliminate construction, trade, contractor's office, and storage yards, created it a different use and defined it differently, then they would fall under that use. But right now, this is the use that.
If you started selling frozen yogurt, frozen custard, then you'd be specialty retail.
We've talked about buying the building next door and doing a doing a specialty drink shop, but no, so.
But not pizza.
But not pizza. Yeah. Or dentist office.
Right. But I don't know. I guess that's, if they did have some type of retail element where they're selling electrical stuff,
So one of our purposes is as well with the unique design is to bring it, one, either kind of make it more retro in fitting, not adding to the building, but just the building in general. The shell is to either take it back to a retro style of Main Street or a more contemporary desire of what's wanted. But in doing that, with some of our services, we offer lighting control and home audio solutions and smart home control. So that office is going to become our showroom. And that was part of the reason that we wanted to move on to Main Street, is to show, hey, come in and see what we offer. We've got all these cool things that people are doing in their homes now with all the smart home technology, that instead of trying to find us in an industrial park somewhere where the office and the warehouse space doesn't really accommodate what we're trying to do with a showroom, it brings us up to Main Street and then lets people see what we can do and what you know, they can go in and interact with the products that we have in the showroom, as it were, in our office space.
Boy, I'm really torn on this one. It seems to me that if we allow this in the CM zone, that there are sufficient restrictions and other, sufficient restrictions and rules, regulations dealing with the various zones that it almost regulates itself in a sense. I mean, if somebody wanted to bring in a lumber yard and have parking behind their building, they're gonna have parking behind their lumber.
Yeah, and I think that's relevant. I mean, it might be to the point where even though the definition is there, the restriction is no lumber yard or other use will ever be interested in the area because of all those restrictions. I agree, but I've been around the block long enough. You give somebody an opportunity, they have no problem taking advantage of it.
Yeah.
I feel comfortable with the use, and any of the concern that I do have, I feel like could be mitigated by removing the exception number 2 under that code that I mentioned before, because having kind of discussed, I know we're not just looking at this one business, but having discussed the types of business that this would fall under, they're similar to what businesses before us, where they perhaps want to have a showroom and have people come to the area. And I think that is consistent with what we've been trying to encourage along Main Street. Now, obviously, you know, planning or storing big backhoes along Main Street is probably not something that we want. So I think, as Chair Hershey pointed out, just the geographical restraints and then the restrictions, I think they will very well regulate those things from coming, but also in the event that we are concerned about any kind of that outdoor storage, I think removing that would then be a further safeguard against something like that. And then with that gone and with all of the different lots and availabilities along Main Street, I feel comfortable with approving this.
And I think if you want to go that direction, then you would need to table the action and have staff renotice that section of the code to remove that. You know, the caution is that if you remove that, then the Pioneer Gardens would have never been able to go there.
Right.
Remove the 50-foot thing or remove
So
outdoor
no,
storage?
everything's completely indoor.
Indoors. And is that a bad thing?
Not necessarily. I just, you know, giving it, so if that's a direction you want to go so that we,
So that would prevent any sort of garden area, though.
Yeah, well, Pioneer, they're already gone, right? So
I know, but they were so sweet.
they were.
you would be saying no outdoor storage at all in the CM zone.
So do you feel like, commissioners, do you feel like, as Chair Hershey was mentioning, just the nature of the area and the restrictions are enough to inhibit sort of these undesirable businesses? Or do you think that it would be needed to take?
Well,
I think we need something, I'm not sure. I just think the non-storage thing needs to be either a
No outside
requirement
storage.
here, but yeah, no outside storage, because that just does not fit in that overlay, I don't think, in a good manner.
yeah, I'm persuaded. I think that's a logical way to approach this, is just to make it it is the CM zone, it's our main street, and outdoor storage just isn't compatible.
So I really struggle with this one a lot. But I think that's probably the right way to go, is to say, this is the only way to make some of this stuff work, and maybe we've moved beyond that type of outdoor storage. Maybe we would have been okay with that 20, 30, 50 years ago, but maybe that's not what we're looking for anymore. So
It's like we may have some consensus. Well, that being the case, Corey, you're recommending that we.
Table and
table
renotice
come-
that section.
Renotice that section.
So what's the, just repeat the proposal, is it to say you can allow
It's the
this
In
use?
123480, number 2 is going to be revised tentatively to prohibit outdoor activities, outdoor storage options in the CM zone.
So 1234,
It's on page
1234,
2 of the
80.
staff report.
okay, so it says, special regulations for commercial zones,
Correct.
use within an enclosed building. Each use in a commercial zone shall be conducted within a fully enclosed building except,
1.
Parking of motor vehicles, and 2, outside, when authorized, located 50 feet away from residential zone boundary.
We would take out 2.
We're taking
completely.
that out.
so where are the other CM zones in the city?
Just Main Street.
Oh, okay. I mean, another option is you just come up with a new definition that says construction services, comma, limited. I mean, we've done
Yeah,
that
and
with some
that's-
other
that-
definitions.
That was what I was asking, if we could just come up with a different
Yeah, you can do
name.
that.
Remove the outside storage.
I mean, you could recommend you table it and look at the definition, segregating it out of a,
So you
know,
just
creating
say
a new
for one of
definition.
these lesser intensity, so it wouldn't include a lumber yard,
Right.
but it might include a plumbing shop, but it wouldn't include outside storage. And it may include I don't know. I mean, that's just another option, because you don't want to make it hard to find the regulation. Whereas if you're you're leaving the definition, people are going to think, by definition, it says outside storage, and then they've got to find somewhere else that no, it's not, because you're on Main Street. But if our only CM zone, so I mean, really, if your CM zone is only on Main Street and you don't want outside storage, this is another legitimate way, but.
Yeah, I think you just table it and say, staff, come up with a way to address the outdoor storage either through a
Or could we
definition
just,
or.
yeah, we could take that out of 12.12 definition,
The number 2.
just take out,
But you do use that definition in other zones, so
places.
that's why
Yeah,
I
that's what
agree
you're
with
saying.
Corey, and he's
Okay.
saying you want to be true to your definition.
that's right.
Whatever creature or use in one zone should be the same in the
Yes,
other zone.
yes.
But you can always create a new, like, we have restaurants. We have
Right.
restaurant fast food, we have restaurant sit-down, we have restaurant
Right.
drive-through.
So would you recommend for clarity an additional definition with a limited, or just removing?
Well, I'm just saying that seems like a reasonable option to me, but, again,
No,
Corey
I
needs
think,
to
I
weigh
think if
in
they
on
just say that's the
that.
direction that they want to go, then we'll go and create the best way we think
Either
to
that or
approach
the other
that.
one, yeah.
And we could certainly come up with something that more has a
Now,
limited, the issue of writing definitions is to making sure you're covering your bases correctly.
yeah.
but-
And I agree that we don't draft ordinances just for one piece of property.
Right.
But if this is the CM zone and you want to allow these kinds of uses, I agree with Corey, you really need to tailor it back. Now, but maybe you could have a plumbing store. If that's really the direction you want to go, I don't think that's what your Main Street plan currently says. But policy-wise, if that's the direction you want to go, I think you could have small shop,
And I think that's what we're maybe looking for, is some of
Yeah.
that small shop type of thing, that's why I keep going back to how come this isn't specialty
Yeah.
retail, if they, have a little retail stop.
Yeah, but to me, it's a
there.
different creature than that very broad, as Corey has said, it's a
Right.
very broad definition. And I don't see that definition on Main Street.
I don't either.
Right.
If you're being true to
I'd
the
like to see a new
policy, and that's what Corey's asking you, that's not a Main Street use.
So I think,
But small retail is.
yeah,
And we've heard over and over, retail along Main Street will never come, but we ought not be restricting it from coming by.
and
by-
this types of, yeah.
But again, you're creating these conflicts with delivery, how big can their trucks be, and, we've had
Is
a,
pest control a part of that? Is it not?
Well,
we've
I'm
had a
not
lot
saying,
of
I'm not saying we're
problems.
prepared to answer that yet. We just want a direction from you. We'll
Yeah.
go
And it may be
analyze
that staff still recommends against it. I mean, I think from a planning professional perspective, we probably will. But if you're trying to get there, we want to make it as legitimate as possible for you.
Give us-
which
give us
one
some
option would
ideas
be to
and
come up with a new definition.
Come up with a new definition. I think it still could be conditional. So if you've got some uses that are going to be incompatible with the neighborhood by smell or otherwise, we can deal with that in a conditional use basis.
Right.
As limited as that opportunity is. We all understand that.
So I would make a motion to table this action and direct staff to prepare.
Look at definition and outdoor storage restrictions.
Yes.
And come back with
Yes, please.
Second.
ideas and recommendations.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Further discussion? All right. Well, Commissioner Daley.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Good
I did
discussion.
write this report Friday morning of your packets. Because the mayor said, get this on.
So we can deal with this at our next meeting, right? You'll have your recommendations ready for that. Sorry to put you off, but
Oh, that's great.
I think it makes
So
sense.
in regards to that, then, will this then,
why don't you come up to the mic so you can be on the record?
will this then go to another planning zoning meeting for next time is our hope?
It will
or-
miss next time because of the notice requirements.
Okay.
So it'll hit what's the second meeting in July?
Second? First? Oh.
Well, the second week in
Sec-
July.
The fourth Wednesday of July.
Why would it have to go
No.
that far?
The
out?
next
We're only first meeting in June.
What are
Today's
the-
the,
Oh, the first, yeah, I'm
First
thinking the
meeting.
end of the
First
month, the
meeting.
first meeting in July.
so that'd be July 12th.
So we're already too
Okay.
late to notice for next time?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So July
With the text
12th
amendment.
would be when we
come back to this group.
come back to this discussion.
Tentative.
And then the next city council meeting after that is when?
They meet the first and third Tuesdays, so they'll work with the city manager and mayor on when they'll schedule it.
Okay.
They'll
All right.
also have their noticing periods too.
So
Okay.
at best, it'd be like August 1st.
Right.
Okay, and that's what I need to know. Our purchase agreement with the Metro was dependent on certain dates, so we'll go revise and kind of amend what we need to there with them, so. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I believe that brings us to the always entertaining community director's report.
Cassie, so it becomes entertaining, actually. What are the items you remember for the night? We have 3 or 4?
What's coming up next?
What's coming up next?
Oh my gosh, I just did this.
We have a rezone request, right?
Rezone on Porter Lane, the Bell property,
Yes.
next to
To Hofoka or the Brighton Homes development on Porter.
another rezone of just a subdivision lot, text amendment for historical, nationally registered historical homes, and then one more. Oh, conceptual plan for a car wash on Parish Lane.
Oh, quick whack.
Yes, we need one. Okay. Thank you. In the future, it would be, I think, helpful for us, just so we could review it before we get here, if you could maybe just list these in the future, just
Sorry,
as,
I usually do, I don't
yeah.
know
just
why that
kinda
didn't
got
come
dropped
up.
off.
It's on the paper copy, just not on the internet copy.
And then we love the city council
Yeah, the city council report, that's always fun, too.
report is also nice.
Yeah, we've got it on one draft. What's draft?
Yeah, I think it all came on the paper. I don't know why it didn't get
Just
onto the
showing-
internet copy. So the AL setbacks was rejected. Was that the
Oh,
latest?
yeah, I saw that.
Yes.
Okay, and then what was the other thing? Cheetos Johnson approved.
Cecil Johnson approved, and then this item, the mayor had me advance notice it before he went to the council, so.
What was the rationale for rejecting the AL setback?
You know, I'm not actually fully comprehending that myself. The best way to describe it is the synergy of the conflict that drove this had obviously drifted into a greater background. Then the council, when we presented the AL, not all of the council was present, and a couple of council members wanted to talk to other people about it, and so they went and did that task, so they tabled it to their next meeting. And it seems to be by the time it came to that next meeting, they maybe fully understood how many buildings it affected and had this debate about users of large agricultural areas versus small agricultural areas, the differences. Is there really different type of agricultural zones? So they actually went on to a little bit of a tangent to say, do we need to create a agricultural medium that's not associated with the industrial versus an agricultural low? And then they brought themselves back and said, okay, we'll talk about that under goal session. And ultimately, I think they just felt like it, particularly with the agriculture, was just too aggressive, which stunned kind of the mayor because he lives in the RL and felt that the RL was a little too aggressive. So I'm not exactly sure. Time is the best way I can say. Time changed minds.
All right, thank you for that report. I don't believe we have any other business to come before the commission, so Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.